Right. So Lake Champlain, is a very valued resource to Vermonters, brings in about 300 million per year in tourism and revenue associated with just the, sort of natural beauty of the lake, fishing, all that stuff. Um, but there are some problems with the lake. This is a photo of cyanobacteria bloom. So blue-green algae is the other name for this. And the treasurer's report from 2017 estimated that we're going to have to pay about 115 million per year to clean up the lake to get it back to where it needs to be. So we all really need to work together to try to improve water quality in Lake Champlain. And I want to just talk briefly about some of the problems with the lake and what's sort of where they're coming from, and then some of the ways that we can improve water quality in the lake. So one of the big issues in Lake Champlain is phosphorus. It's a nutrient, feeds our plants, but also feeds algae and cyanobacteria. And essentially EPA has told us we have too much phosphorus in Lake Champlain. We need to clean it up. Phosphorus gets into the lake in many different ways. It can, as in this picture, be washed into the lake with a big rainstorm. In this case, it can actually bind to the really tiny soil particles that are like washing down the stream and then ending up in the lake. It can come from agriculture. It can come from fertilizing your garden or your lawn, and a variety of other sources. Another way that it gets there is from essentially runoff from impervious surfaces. So although there may not be phosphorus, running off the surface of this city on the right, you can see in those diagrams that the runoff on the right side is much greater than the runoff on sort of a natural environment where you're only getting about 10% of the water running off the surface and into the stream. In a city or a built environment, you're getting 55% of that water that falls running off into the stream. So when that happens and that water is, shunted straight into a stream, you suddenly have more volume in the stream, which then can cause, stream bank erosion and more problems sort of with more water rushing down downstream. And when that's carrying, sediment with it, bringing phosphorus into the lake. Okay, so on the left side of the screen is essentially like what Vermont is contributing to the Lake Champlain Basin and where that phosphorus is coming from. This is all like via modeling, so not exact numbers, obviously. You can see that most of that phosphorus comes from agricultural lands, so about 41%. 21% from stream channels and 18% from developed lands, and then 16% from forested lands, which is sort of counterintuitive because we think, okay, forests should be like in pretty good shape. But unfortunately, a lot of our forests have, been logged heavily. And when those logging roads were like closed out, if you will, they maybe weren't closed out properly. So there's a lot of erosion coming like straight down old logging roads or washing into streams from some of these forest lands.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that phosphorus originating in the forest lands or just being picked up by streams flowing out of them?
I think it's more from the streams themselves. My understanding is that most of our soils here are not like naturally rich in
Yeah.
phosphorus. And then on the right side is sort of the target that EPA and the state have set for Lake Champlain. So like how much phosphorus do we have to reduce to get, back in line, if you will. So we need to go from 631 metric tons a year down to 417 tons a year. Most of that reduction has to come from the agricultural sector, with, additional coming from our stream channels, and some other reductions.
Can I say something about forest lands?
Please.
So one of the things about forest lands, yes, so there's naturally occurring phosphorus in all the living tissue, leaves and all the wood. But what's really changed is that we have erosive water courses through forests that did not used to be there. We have less infiltration and we have more erosion. So
More channelized water moving. Along that line, we have done some funky things to rivers over the years. A little hard to see, but on the left side of the screen this is the La Platte River here in Hinesburg at sort of near O'Neill Road and Shelburne Falls Road. And you can see that river on the left is very like naturally curvy. It's going back and forth. And on the right side is the same river, La Platte River here in Hinesburg. This is at Charlotte Road and Silver Street heading straight south, 116 curving through the center of town. And you can see that river, again, the La Platte is very straight. Back, several decades ago, we went in and straightened our rivers because we thought it would be great to allow, us to farm or to build our houses or whatever right up next to the river. It allowed us more, more land, more tillable land, more pasturable land. But as it turns out, we've kind of learned better since then, and we know now that making those rivers straight really made water flow faster and can cause more problems downstream. We're also seeing more frequent flooding, like we saw the last couple of years here in town. These, larger rain events, getting rain in the winter instead of snow, which this year we did okay. This is not here. This is, I don't know, Waitsfield or something. It was like during Irene, so it's a ways back. I should update this with a good Hinesburg photo.
Yeah.
So
Expert audience.
yeah. She's like, that's not in Hinesburg.
Yeah, for her.
So we really all have to work together, to improve this problem.
Actually, I thought it might be in Hinesburg. I just didn't.
You were trying to figure it out, yeah.
Wow, that is bad. Okay.
So I'm going to do a quick video, which I think is helpful to understand some of these concepts, and then I'm going to zoom through a few other slides quickly and get to the numbers. Okay, so even though I'm talking to you guys here in Hinesburg today, it's obviously important that what we're doing here is helping and affecting what's going on downstream. And all the way out through both the La Platte and Lewis Creek here in town, all the way out to Lake Champlain. So thinking about, moving buildings out of our floodplains, reconnecting the river to allow it to flood into the floodplain, which beavers do a great job of. Slowing the flow down by allowing these meanders to reform on those sort of straightened stretches of rivers, and leaving those natural sediments in the stream beds to prevent down cutting and bank erosion are all really helpful. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little because we're slightly short on time. But, just touching on a few ideas, voluntary conservation measures, conserving land, especially near rivers, allows not only improved water quality, but, wildlife passage and that type of thing. We do a lot of water quality monitoring here in our watersheds with Lewis Creek Association and volunteers. And I want to give you some basics of a few of the things that we've learned. Unfortunately, we don't have the data finalized from last year, so I don't have it all up on a pretty story map yet, but I have a few slides to show you anyways. The red dots that you're looking at are both Lewis Creek and La Platte River watersheds, as well as the sort of smaller direct to lake drainages on the left side of the screen. And the southerly portion of this is the Lewis Creek watershed. The northern section is the La Platte River watershed. So here in Hinesburg, we sampled 3 sites this past year, the red dots that you're looking at. And then there are 3 more that are north of us, but that actually drain like into or through Hinesburg, all in that La Platte River watershed. So just to look at some of the data from this past year, so now this is where this thing gets in the way because we got to be able to see those labels. Okay, so go away. All right, so on the bottom part of your screen, you're looking at sort of the upstream to downstream tributaries to the La Platte on the left, and then the one main stem sample site that we had, which was near the wastewater treatment plant in gray on the right side. And you can see that essentially the standard for phosphorus is about 27 milligrams per liter. And so that's like somewhere, right in between this 20 and 40. You can see that 3 of our sites were all like pretty much below that, which is really good and sort of unusual here in the La Platte River watershed. Like we often have sites that are well above the phosphorus standard. These 3 sites are all sort of coming off Mount Pritchard, so that like area. And we're fairly happy with those. This one in particular, the St. George site, is just below, it's actually in St. George, it's just below the golf course. That little stream that comes under comes right across 116, just below 2A, just south of 2A. So that one has like slightly elevated levels, and I'll show you some other numbers here in just a minute that sort of draw that out as like maybe a slightly more concerning area. These 2 sites here are both water, actually the bill samples that goes into Lake Iroquois. So this site on South Road is part of sort of the same drainage that then goes under BB Lane before it crosses into Lake Iroquois north of the lake. So you can see the South Road actually has slightly higher levels than the downstream site, which is, a little different as well.
So what's the downstream side?
Oh, this in gray,
Is that
It's right on the road. It's right on the road that takes you to the beach.
Yeah, right on BB Lane.
A little bit before you get to the where the kiosk is, there is
that's the one that comes from the north. What was the other one?
Yeah, they're both
Oh,
from
both
the
on.
north, yeah.
Oh,
and
One's
that's
just
where we
further out.
had beavers on
Right,
occasion
yeah.
clogging up the home.
Yeah. So the idea here is we want to slow the water down, spread it out, and sink it into the ground to try to help sort of naturalize the way that the water moves across our environment. And I'm going to skim right past some of these photos. This is like a roadside swale in Charlotte where we're using these check dams to try to slow water down before it reaches the brook, which is up at the sort of upper part of the photo. This is here in Hinesburg, our Hinesburg floodplain restoration. So we're trying to get this water to spread out. Originally, there was berms here right next to the brook because this brook had also been straightened and, there was some work done on it. There were buildings right here next to the stream. So we were able to excavate, move soil around, add some rocks and logs into the brook to allow it to kind of flood out onto the floodplain when we get these larger storms, and then do some planting here along the
There's
side.
not a lot more vegetation there, is there not?
Yeah, it looks a lot better now. This was like right after we planted in 2020, I think it was 2020. It was like COVID.
Well, then we planted again.
Yes, we did some additional,
Because
you did some, okay.
some of it, that
Yeah,
wasn't,
yeah,
I wasn't, I.
yeah.
Much more recent, but now,
Okay.
now it's.
It's looking good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then sinking water into the ground. This is a rain garden at the Shelburne Community School, where originally there were these, large catch basins at the edge of the pavement where water was just going down into the pipes, and from there it was going piped out directly into McCabe's Brook and then onto Lake Champlain. So now the water is able to flow into this little rain garden, get cleaned up by some of the plants before it hits those pipes and goes out to the lake. Okay, so thinking real quickly for we got 5 minutes here. Some of the things towns can do, think about increasing setbacks from rivers. That can include things like adopting river corridor protections, which I know is on our to-do list here in Hinesburg. Designing standards for roads that incorporate these larger storm events. So, roadside swales, for example, that'll carry a 100-year storm instead of whatever they're designed for now. Applying some of the principles from our state municipal roads general permit to these private roads. We have 33% of our roads here in Hinesburg are private. They don't have any, particular standards applied to them. So, we hope that people design them correctly, but there's nobody out there measuring or figuring out if they are. So thinking about should we take some of these standards and apply them to new private roads as they're built? Eventually, we will have all of our water quality data updated on our new story map online, but you can look at the last 3 years of data at this website. We talked a little bit about conservation and a few things that we can do on our own properties, like keeping soil on our properties, fixing our driveways so that the water doesn't flow straight down the driveway, but off into the swale. Maybe creating rain gardens or planting natives, maintaining the wooded buffers sort of along our waterways and our properties. And lastly, oh yes, yep.
When we do. The Design Review Board looks at applications, aren't they now looking at
roads?
They're looking at the stormwater.
They're looking at stormwater in
site.
some cases, yeah, but I don't think there's any designs for roads or any standards for roads. I mean, they might if we were to say, hey, I don't think that culvert's big enough, they might request that the applicant make it bigger, but I don't think they can hold them to it.
Enough for them to voluntarily apply them.
Yeah.
Right.
Here are the standards.
As a reference, at least.
Mm-hmm.
But they're looking at the topic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Private landowners, if you live on a lake or a stream, you can get an assessment from Winooski Natural Resources Conservation District. Has staff who will come out and do these assessments on your property and then make some recommendations. We also have our new guide, which we can pass around, and there's one here at the library, which will help you sort of assess your property, thinking about where it's erosion happening, what are some potential solutions for that erosion. And it goes into some details as well of hey, if I want to build a rain garden, how would I figure out how much water gets there? How do I know if I have good soil to allow water to soak into the ground? And then there's a ton of resources out there. So that's all included in the back of this guide too. Various other, manuals, guides, toolboxes, mapping systems, blah, blah, blah. Lots of things out there provided by the state and others. So you can find a digital copy on our website, or you can check out this one. There's one here in the library to explore as well. So with that, I will stop. Take a few questions if anyone has any.